I want to build a knop joint that looks like this using the Panther router, and for that I've printed some double-sized templates to cut out. So now I need to glue all these onto a template with these little dowel pegs in exactly the right place. And I'm not sure how to do that, so I'm just going to glue them onto another copy of the template. And I need another template for the other half of the joint. Now to cut this shape on the end of my workpiece, I have to mount it like this, and I could tilt the table for that, but that makes it very difficult to clamp, and I also risk milling into the table. So I made a sacrificial mount to attach to the front edge of the table. So I am really curious if this is actually going to work. It helps to lock the template holder down. Except for that botched first hole, it looks like it might work. Setting this up, I just realized it's much better to have this template facing up so I can see what I'm cutting here. And for the depth of cut, I just put the space between the two stops, the range of motion, to be the thickness of this workpiece, and that way with the router all the way back I can use that as my stop for the stock, and then I can cut that far into it. Not a perfect fit. I think my dowels might be a little bit too big. There. And that's the hole that I botched. I guess I could have just done this before I tried this out to just check the templates against each other. With the test joint done, I got some nice contrasting birch and cherry, and I carefully lined everything up, and now I'm ready to cut joints for a box. I got my other nice piece of hardwood mounted on my sacrificial mount there, and I'm a bit paranoid about getting the alignment a bit wrong, so I'm always checking with the bearing here in that corner here to see where that lines up, and then in the opposite corner to make sure that lines up relatively the same on the other side so that I know I'm centered. I start by making the holes, and the holes are actually a bit bigger than the bit. So I drill in the middle and then sweep around the circle, and I make a 5/16 inch hole with a 1/4 inch bit that way. Well, a nice thing about an overly tight fit is there's hardly any gaps. I want to make a bottom that fits between those pieces into a slot, and that slot needs to be where the joint is, otherwise that groove is going to show up on the end, so I need to cut that slot here. And I'll cut that slot with a series of cuts on the table saw. Now the assembly is a bit of a challenge. I would really like to dry fit this to make sure, but the joints are so tight, it's just too hard to get it apart again. So I just have to make sure I have my hammer ready. And the glue is really quite redundant. Ooh, perfectly square. I'm going to glue in the plywood bottom because pretty as this joint is, it's not the strongest joint. I was going to flush trim those joints on the belt sander, but I left a bit too much, so I'm rough cutting it on the table saw. And here's that box, all sanded and varnished. It's a pretty neat looking joint. And it kind of reminds me of this box that I built a few years ago to demonstrate another thing with the Panther rotor, which is to make these dovetail joints that look like hand-cut ones. And this was inspired by a video by Pask Makes, who made a knap joint using a very different method from mine. And I just sort of said, hey, I think I can make that on a Panther rotor easier. And I've got a bunch more thoughts about knap joints and the history of them, and I'll put that in a separate video on my second channel.